Good afternoon or good morning to those on the West Coast. I'd like to call the meeting to order. My name is Kathleen Gray, and I am a member, I'm chairing the meeting today for the Board of Scientific Counselors. The first thing we'll do is have counselors introduce themselves, and I will start. I am an associate professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in the Institute for the Environment. My expertise is in stakeholder and community engagement, as well as science and risk communication. And I'm just going to call on the Board of Scientific Counselors members who are here to introduce themselves as well. Dr. Bloom, please come off of, if you're not on video, come on video and introduce yourself.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Eric Blom. I am a Vice President of Development Biological Sciences at AbbVie, and my expertise is the safety evaluation of experimental medicines.
Thank you. Dr. Haynes will not be joining us this afternoon, so Dr. Kimbrough.
Yes, Sean Kimbrough, Professor of Department of Microbiology, Biochemistry, and Immunology at Morehouse School of Medicine. Our expertise is community engagement and health disparities in the biology of health disparities.
Thank you. Dr. Line also will not be joining us this afternoon, so Dr. Martin.
Yeah, hello, everyone. I'm Matt Martin, and I'm an Executive Director and Global Head of Computational Safety Sciences at Pfizer within the Drug Safety Research and Development Organization. And my expertise is primarily artificial intelligence, machine learning, and applications in computational biology and chemistry.
Thank you. Dr. Meeker.
Hi, John Meeker, Professor of Environmental Health Sciences at the University of Michigan School of Public Health. My expertise is in exposure science and environmental epidemiology.
Dr. Payne Sturgis.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Devin Payne Sturgis. I'm Associate Professor of Environmental Health Sciences at the University of Maryland School of Public Health. And my expertise areas include children's environmental health, cumulative risk assessment, exposure assessment, and policy reform.
Thank you. Dr. Singla.
Good afternoon, Veena Singla. I'm a senior scientist with the Natural Resources Defense Council and the People and Communities Program. And my expertise is in applying the most current scientific principles and data to make better policy decisions to protect communities' health. Thank you.
And Dr. Yang.
Hello, everyone. My name is Janet Yang. I'm a professor in the Department of Communication at SUNY Buffalo. My expertise is on public risk perception and behavior science.
Thank you. We have a number of other introductions that we're going to go through.
Hi, it's Dr. Rusi. Do you want me to introduce myself?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Did we miss you, Mark? I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. I'm a professor of medicine and epidemiology at Yale. My area of expertise is the occupational medicine of healthcare workers.
Thank you. Okay, so we have other staff who we would like to introduce, starting with the NIEHS Director, Dr. Wojcik.
Hello, everyone. This is Rick Wycheck, the Director of NIEHS, and most importantly, relative to today's session, I am the Director of the National Toxicology Program.
Great. Dr. Archer.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Trevor Archer. I'm the Deputy Director at NIEHS and also the Acting Scientific Director for the Division of Translational Toxicology. I'm a biochemist and epigeneticist by training.
Dr. Wolf.
Good afternoon, good morning. I'm Mary Wolf. I'm the Director of the Office of Policy Review and Outreach for the Division of Translational Toxicology at NIEHS.
Dr. Brownlow.
I'm Eleni Brownlow. I'm a health scientist in the Office of Policy Review and Outreach in the Division of Translational Toxicology at NIEHS, and I'm also the designated federal officer for the NTP Board of Scientific Counselors. Welcome, everybody.
Dr. Gamboa de Costa.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gonçalo Gamboa da Costa, and I serve as the FDA Liaison Officer to the National Toxicology Program.
And Dr. Lawson.
Hello, everybody. I'm Christina Lawson, and I am the NIOSH liaison to the NTP. Thank you.
I believe we'd like to have other people here in the room introduce themselves. Yes, Dr. Brownlow? So how would you like to navigate that?
Sure. If you would like to start, Ginny Kitt.
Jeannie Liu from ICF, Contractor Support for the Board of Scientific Counselors meetings.
Kit Vincent-Haler, ICF, Contractor Support for the Board of Scientific Counselors meeting.
Dr. Eaton.
Hi, Dave Eaton. I'm the chair of the BSC working group.
Lindsay.
Go ahead.
This is Lindsay Green. I'm at ICF, and I'm also Contractor Support for the Board of Scientific Counselors meeting.
Catherine Smith with ICF, also a Contractor Support for the Board of Scientific Counselors.
Kelly Shipkowski, NIAHS, Contracting Officers Representative.
Okay, now we will have introductions from the Board of Scientific Counselors Working Group, and I'll just let Dave say hello again as chair. I'm following. Yeah.
Oh, yes. So the Board of Scientific Counselors Working Group roster includes myself as the chair of the board. I am emeritus professor of environmental and occupational health sciences at the University of Washington in Seattle, and adjunct professor of pharmacology and toxicology at the University of Arizona. Dr. Calafat?
Hello, I'm Antonia Calafat. I work at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. My expertise is analytical chemistry, biomonitoring, and exposure science.
Thank you. Dr. Den Besten?
Hi, I'm Pam Den Besten. I work at the University of California, San Francisco. My expertise is tooth enamel formation, mechanisms of fluorosis, pediatric dentistry.
Thank you. Dr. Engel?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Engel. I'm a professor of epidemiology at UNC Chapel Hill, and I'm have expertise in environmental and pediatric epidemiology.
Thank you. And Dr. Georgiev? I think he is unable to join us at the moment and will join us a little bit later. Dr. Maynor, I also don't believe he is able to join us. Next slide, please. David Michaels, who is also a member of the BSC board of scientific, or the Board of Scientific Counselors, is also not able to join us. Dr. Morton.
Good morning, I'm Sally Morton. I'm Executive Vice President of Knowledge Enterprise at Arizona State University, and I'm a professor of statistics. And my expertise is evidence synthesis, particularly meta-analysis.
Thank you. Dr. Sajib is also unable to join us today, and I believe Dr. Saldana is on the phone, so go ahead, Dr. Saldana. I'm sorry, he is not on at the moment, but will join us later.
Okay, so we would like to start with some introductory remarks from Dr. Wojcik, so we'll turn it over to you, Dr. Wojcik.
Okay, terrific. I just want to double check. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Terrific. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. As the director of the NTP, I want to thank all of you for the participation in this afternoon's event. I especially want to thank Dr. Eaton for all of the work that he's done over the course of the last year. I want to thank Dr. Gray and members of the BSC, and of course, I want to thank members of the working group of the BSC. So first of all, I want to remind us all that the NTP is not a division of NIEHS. So it's rather it's a virtual collaboration between the NIH, the CDC, and the FDA. So in my capacity as the director of the NTP, I report directly to Anne Levine, who is the Assistant Secretary for Health at HHS. So to set the stage for today's event, I've been asked to provide a brief history of the work that was conducted by the NTP that is under review today. In this regard, it was back in 2016, several years ago, when the NTP was asked to conduct a systematic review of the literature on the effects of fluoride on children's cognitive development. My colleagues in the NTP rose to the challenge. They developed a report that was taken to the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine for a rigorous peer review. So the peer review committee made several recommendations on how to improve the document, and they concluded in this first round of review that there was not enough evidence to support a hazard classification. My colleagues then modified the document to include a meta-analysis, which was requested by the peer reviewers from the National Academy, and then they subjected this to a second round of peer review by the NASA. So again, the reviewers concluded there was not enough evidence to support a hazard classification. But nevertheless, the peer reviewers from the National Academy encouraged the NTP, my colleagues, to continue to explore this topic. Therefore, Dr. Berich, who was the director of the DTP at the time, made the decision to split the report into a State of the Science NTP monograph and a meta-analysis manuscript that was intended to be published as a peer-reviewed article in a journal, for example, like JAMA Pediatrics. So once the draft of the State of the Science was prepared, it was peer-reviewed by 5 independent authorities as part of the NTP, the standard NTP review process, and it was circulated to our colleagues across the NTP at CDC, FDA, for example, and to subject matter experts of those organizations for their expert opinion prior to publication. So we originally anticipated that the State of the Science would be published as an NTP monograph in May of 2022. However, when it became clear to me that there were over 500 comments and concerns from peer reviewers and the subject matter experts, I took the responsibility to delay publication until these comments and concerns could be addressed. So I did this because I felt that it was absolutely my responsibility as the director of the NTP to make sure that we get the science right. You know, if there were 500 substantive comments and concerns, we couldn't proceed with publication until those were addressed. Additionally, I took the step to engage the NTP BSc to address these 500 comments and concerns. The BSc didn't have the necessary expertise to engage in this review, so Dr. Eden, who was the chair of the BSc at the time, developed a working group of the BSA that had the necessary expertise to address the comments and concerns. So it took nearly 3 months to identify a group of individuals who had both the expertise and didn't have any perceived or any absolute level of conflict of interest. Then it took the working group from September through the middle of March to work through all of the 500 comments and concerns. They did this very systematically, they were very careful, and it took time to do this. So today's session is all about the report back of the working group to the BSc. And according to FACA rules, this is required to be conducted in an open forum, as we are conducting today. And again, it's all in the interest of making sure that we have openness and transparency. And by the way, I just want to add, I think there were some questions. So I just want everyone to be aware that the function of the NTP BSc is to oversee the quality of the science that is produced by the NTP scientists. So therefore, engaging the BSc to address the 500 comments or over 500 comments and concerns raised by the peer reviewers and the subject matter experts is well within the scope of the work of the BSc. So, Dr. Gray, is that what you were looking for?
Yes, thank you. We appreciate the historical context, and that sets us up well to proceed. Now I'd like to first introduce Dr. Brownlow again so she can address some conflict of interest issues.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. So I'll start by reading the conflict of interest statement, and I'll follow up with some housekeeping items. The members of the NTP Board of Scientific Counselors serve as individual scientists and not as representative of any organization. Each member is to exercise judgment prior to or during the meeting as to whether a potential conflict of interest might exist relative to the topic under discussion due to his or her occupational affiliation, professional activity, or financial interests, or those of their spouse, minor child, partner, or organization. Board members are asked to bring to the attention of the committee and of the federal officer any potential conflict of interest that might pertain to the topic being considered at the meeting. Should there be a potential conflict of interest, it will be handled in accordance with departmental policies and regulatory requirements. Thank you. And regarding housekeeping, we want to emphasize that this is a public meeting that is being broadcast to a remote audience. When speaking, please remember to introduce yourself for the listening audience. And since this is a public meeting, we ask all to reserve the use of the Zoom chat box to technical issues only. All discussions in this meeting will take place in the public forum and will be captured in the meeting minutes. We also ask presenters and speakers to mute yourselves and turn off your video unless you are speaking as part of Zoom etiquette. Slides and video recording will be made available on the website as soon as they meet the government requirements for accessibility. And again, minutes and video will be posted on the website after they have been reviewed for accuracy by the BSC members, approved by the chair, and then meet the government requirements for accessibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brownlow. So now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Eaton in his role as the chair of the BSC working group so that he can share with us the work that has been done. And I want to echo Dr. Wojciech's gratitude to all the members of the working group who have dedicated substantial time and energy towards this effort.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. It's my pleasure to present to the Board of Scientific Counselors our draft State of the Science monograph and draft meta-analysis manuscript on fluoride, our review of these documents and the reviewers' comments on these documents. Next slide, please. So we've already heard a little bit about the background on this, and I will be brief on this. I just wanted to reiterate some of the abbreviations that you will see on the slides to come. The BSC is the Board of Scientific Counselors Working Group, and we will be talking about the assessment that this working group did and our report, and I will provide a summary of that. Just a comment about the process. Within the federal government, there is a process that is defined to establish ad hoc working groups to assist standing federal advisory committees, for example, the Board of Scientific Counselors, to perform fact-finding functions for the committees. And it is under this aegis that the director chose to appoint a working group to focus on fluoride and neurodevelopment reports coming out of the National Toxicology Program. Next slide, please. Again, I'm going to be very brief here. Dr. Wojciech has covered a little bit of this. The main point on this slide being that, next slide, please, that there are two reports that were developed. Initially, it was one. They were split into two documents, one of which we will call or refer to as the State of the Science monograph, and the other is a meta-analysis manuscript. And the dates here are important. The documents that we worked from were July 2021, June 2022. Well, the State of the Science monograph was reviewed, and it was after revisions of that, there is a version of September 2022, which was available to this committee as well as the previous versions for our evaluation. And July of 2022 is the latest date on the draft meta-analysis manuscript. Next slide, and we can skip over that. So this is what we're focusing on here. So as Dr. Wojciech indicated, he asked me to convene a working group. At that point in time, I was chair of the Board of Scientific Counselors, but was finishing my term, and so I did not have any conflicts here in doing so. And the Board of Scientific Counselors working group would have access to the external peer review and or federal agency comments on both of these documents, and of course the documents themselves dated September 22 for the State of the Science and July of 2022 for the meta-analysis manuscript. And we were provided other documents as discussed as background information. Next slide, please. This is important. This is the specific charge to the committee, and it is to evaluate the adequacy of the NTP responses. This is the authors of this reports to external peer review and or federal agency comments that were received during the development of the draft State of the Science monograph and the draft meta-analysis. Importantly, we were not charged with being independent peer reviewers, and this is really important. We have expertise, but we, by design, we're not specific experts in meta-analysis of fluoride in IQ, for example. We have, as you saw, expertise on meta-analysis, on systematic review, on basic toxicology in a number of areas. But we were not charged with providing independent peer review. Rather, we were charged with evaluating the adequacy of the response of the authors to comments that had already been provided. That said, we did want to take advantage of the expertise on this committee, and if they saw changes in wording, for example, that would improve the clarity of the document, then those were also included in our report. Next slide, please. So I'm going to skip over this other than that second bullet, which again is an important point, was that Dr. Wojcik gave me the responsibility putting this committee together. Decision as to who would serve on this, I solicited comments, and Dr. Wojcik asked for nominations of potential members from agencies. I took all of that information into account in assessing who would serve on this committee. I identified the areas of expertise that I felt were necessary to cover this, and I also made the decision that to have a functional working group, we really couldn't deal with more than about 10 members on this committee, so I limited the size of the committee to 10 members, including myself as the chair. I identified potential members. We then did extensive conflict of interest evaluations to make sure that we didn't have people that would be on the committee reviewing their own work or reviewing the work of close colleagues, et cetera. And Dr. Wolf and myself then interviewed each of these candidates before I made the final decision as to who would be on the working group. Next slide, please. You've heard from many of these candidates. I'm not going to go over this other than to say that we were well represented, and it was important to me as chair of this to have some redundancy and expertise, because some of these topics, such as meta-analysis, such as systematic review, are complex topics, and I wanted to make sure that we had overlapping expertise. True for the whole area of neurodevelopment and neurotoxicity of different compounds, and so I was very pleased with the committee that we put together in terms of having the expertise that was needed to fully address the comments that were made by other reviewers of this document who could objectively look at these comments and objectively review and evaluate the NTP author's response to those comments. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'm just going to stop to make sure we are at the point where I hope everybody understands the process and how this went about. If there are any questions now, I would take them in terms of the process. And if not, we will launch into discussing the report itself.
I don't see any raised hands. If you do have any questions, please raise your hand in Zoom.
Okay, well then we will move on. And what I'm going to do here in the first couple of slides, or the next couple of slides, is set out what it is that we actually did. Within the draft State of the Science monograph, there were 13 different reviewers, or sets of reviewers, of which a total of 325 individual comments were provided to the NTP, and those authors responded to each and every one of those comments. For the meta-analysis manuscript, there were 9 sets of reviewer comments, a total of 141 comments, in which, again, the NTP authors responded to each one of those comments. We then anonymized these. If you go to the next slide, the way that the document is set up, if you were to look at the report itself, you will see there's some color coding and some number and letter coding. For the State of the Science monograph, each comment was coded by a letter, which represented the reviewer, and the number which represented that specific reviewer's comment. Some reviewers had as many as 40 or 50 different comments, some had fewer than that. We reversed that for the meta-analysis manuscript, in which the number represented the reviewer and the letter then represented the specific comment, just to avoid confusion between these two documents. Next slide. Importantly, we redacted the source of those comments. It was important for us to maintain objectivity, to ensure that that in our job of reviewing the adequacy of the response, that our committee was blinded as to who actually made that response, whether it was an agency or an individual reviewer. This was an important process. So throughout the document, if you look at it, you will see blanked out things, and that is the redactions to assure anonymity of who the reviewer was. Next slide. So over the period of time that once we had all these documents put together, and you can imagine it took a great deal of effort on the part of Dr. Wolf and the contract staff that assisted her to prepare all of these comments in a blinded fashion. These documents were then provided to us, and I took on the role of reading through all 466 comments and deciding which two members of our committee would be appropriate to assess each comment. And the idea here was, obviously the comments differed in terms of the subject matter that they might be on. We assigned these comments to people on the committee with the appropriate expertise to evaluate that. And every comment was looked at by at least two people. And if the evaluator pair then reviewed the comments that they were assigned, and they came back and they looked at whether they agreed with the reviewer comments or whether they had some level of concern. And if either one or both of the evaluators had any concerns, then that comment was discussed among the full committee. And we then worked together to figure out how exactly we were to respond to that. Let's go to the next slide now, and I'll show you basically how this report was put together, and then we will talk through the findings of this report. So again, overall assessment of each of the reviewers' comments and the NTP authors' responses used one of three statements. For all 466 comments we looked at, everyone was assigned to have one of three statements. The first statement was that the BSE working group considers the authors' responses to the reviewers' comments to be adequate. And if both evaluator pairs deemed that the response was adequate, then there was, then we did not discuss it. Now, I would just comment that occasionally in our discussions we came up with where one evaluator had said something and then we looked back and said, wait a minute, that comment is kind of like what somebody else said. We would go back and look at those. But for the most part, we relied upon two evaluator pairs to make this first judgment. Next slide, please. The second category is the working group considered the author's response to reviewers' comments adequate, but we felt that there could be some enhancement of the document and clarity to enhance either the monograph or the manuscript, and we would make a suggestion. In many instances, these were suggestions that the authors themselves had provided in text in response, and we felt that's a good response, but that should be in the document. And so you'll see a lot of suggestions where we had suggested that they put the comments in the response into the documents. Next slide, please. And then the last category was the working group considers the NTP author's response to reviewers' comments to be inadequate. And if we felt it was inadequate, we then provided recommendations, occasionally including specific language, but oftentimes just a description of what more needs to be explained in one document or the other. Next slide, please. So with that introduction as to how our report was created and put together, the organization of the report, if you look at that, you'll see there's only 3 chapters and 3 appendices. Chapter 1 is an introduction and a summary assessment, summary of the assessment with some global points that I will be discussing. Chapter 2 is focused on the state of the science monograph, and Chapter 3 is focused on the meta-analysis manuscript, and the appendices are the documents from which we worked, including some links to link the 2 documents, the report document to the specific manuscript or monograph. Next slide, please. So again, the report follows the same structure that I just talked about in terms of how the information was provided to the committee. We felt in the report it was really important that people see exactly what a reviewer said and exactly what the response of the NTP authors was. So as you go through the report and as you look at the slides that I will have, for example, you'll see B213, that's reviewer B. Reviewer B2 is comment number 13. There's the redaction, that's a comment, and then you'll see in blue type what the NTP authors stated, and usually they said their response was yes, we agree, or no, we don't agree, or no change was requested, etc. And you see the response of the NTP authors in the blueprint. And then in orange, you will see the BSC working group assessment. And in this example, the two examples shown here for both the State of the Science monograph and the meta-analysis manuscript, you'll see that this is an example of where they agreed with the response and there was no change made in the document, no change or recommendations made by the working group. Next slide. So here is just showing the color coding again, black for what the comment, what the reviewer comment was, blue for what the NTP author's response was, and orange for what the working group assessment is in this. Next slide, please. So this is shown throughout, and again, here I reiterate with examples of where the BSC working group assessment considers it adequate, and that's that. Where they find the assessment was adequate, but we make a suggestion that would clarify or help improve the manuscript, and we would make that suggestion, as you see number 2 there, a specific comment about what they might do to move some stuff that was in the appendix into the text so it was more clear. And then in the third example, you'll see where we thought it was inadequate, and then we go and we provide a specific recommendation about what we thought was inadequate in the response and how that could be addressed. Next slide, please. So overall, in our assessment of this, the majority of our responses we felt were adequate. 87% of the responses of the 325 comments in the State of the Science we thought were adequate, or in some instances may require some or suggest some additional changes. For example, in the State of the Science, it was about 16% of the comments we found were adequate, but we felt they could improve by adding some more text to it. And 42%, 42 comments rather, and 13% we felt were in the State of the Science were inadequate, and that the document and the strength of the science would be improved by addressing whatever specific comment we made. For the draft meta-analysis, we found 65% of the comments were adequate, but we made for 31 of those, or 22%, suggestions that would enhance the quality or clarity of the draft meta-analysis manuscript. And we found that 50 of those comments, which represents 35% overall, were deemed inadequate, and for those we then made specific recommended changes. Next slide, please. So for the purposes of this report and for the summary chapter 1 in the report, we tried to bin some of these comments into global issues because, not surprisingly, many reviewers had similar comments at different places, and so we have tried to put those together for the purposes of this presentation. There were some issues that we found for different broad issues that were common to both documents that I'll talk about. There were sometimes issues that were specific to the State of the Science monograph or specific to the draft meta-analysis manuscript, and we will go through some of those. And again, for the assessments of either adequate but, where we make suggestions, or inadequate, where we make recommendations. We binned all of the comments that we made into one or more of 4 broad categories for the purposes of streamlining this discussion. There were what we determined to be scientific issues. There were issues that were not so much scientific issues, but rather issues about the sufficiency of information. or about the precision and exactly how specific things were said in the text. And then finally, the whole issue of research needs, what isn't known and how should these manuscripts address what's not known in terms of future research needs. And it's not surprisingly of all of these comments that we had, not every one of them fits neatly into these categories. And so we're not covering every single thing that this committee recommended. Rather, we are providing some examples to highlight how this was done. So next slide, please. So the presentation of global issues in the following slides, I'll use specific working group assessments to represent the recommendations relative to these four sort of global issues. And again, the examples may apply to either the monograph or the meta-analysis manuscript or both. Again, I would note that sometimes an author's response might fit in multiple of these categories, not necessarily just a single one. And again, there were a number of comments that don't necessarily fit neatly into any of these categories that you will find in the report. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to repeat this other than to remind you of the charge, which was to evaluate the adequacy of the NTP's author's response. It was not to do independent peer review. I would say also that the whole purpose of this exercise is to ensure that the NIEHS NTP authors adequately responded to the reviewer's comments via edits and scientifically justifiable rebuttals as appropriate to, in other words, enhance the scientific veracity and clarity of these two documents. Next slide, please. So I will launch into some of these examples. The first set of global examples pertains to scientific issues. In this first example, as you see here on this slide, there were several reviewer comments on the extent of information presented in the State of the Science monograph regarding the consistency or inconsistency of available information. So, for example, here you see reviewer C comment 28 and reviewer G comment 18 were similar, and they noted that the NTP authors discussed consistency of information across studies, even though many study features, for example, exposure measures, tests, and scales used across the studies were not consistent or standardized. And reviewer C felt in this comment that the author's claim of consistency is not supported by the evidence presented, and the reviewer referred to figures 1A through 5. And the BSC working group basically agreed with these reviewers and recommended that the NTP authors in the State of the Science monograph focus not on talking about just the consistencies, but should also provide more information about the inconsistencies in the evidence. This includes, as noted in reviewer C comment 28, refraining from a focus on just consistency. There is a section in the report said unexplained inconsistencies that was largely talking about consistencies, and they felt there needed to be some more discussion about inconsistencies. And for reviewer G comment 18, they recommended that the authors discuss all 19 studies in the results section, and where the authors had noted that 18 studies supported their conclusions, but there was little discussion about the study that did not, and they felt that this should be, they should all be discussed. Next slide, please. Another couple of slides here pertaining to scientific issues are around a similar theme that came up repeatedly in multiple different reviews, and that has to do with the whole issue of dose and timing and dose response. For example, reviewer comment G50 here talks about the dose effects and thresholds. Reviewer 4E comment 4 talks about the timing, exposure, and life stages. And reviewer B2 comment 12 talks about dose effect. And you can go through here and look through the reviewer comments. And if you were diving into this report and look back at what the specific reviewer comments and the responses to those comments are, you will find that throughout the document there is a lot of issues about how the authors address dose and dose response. And I highlight a few of those here, but I'm not going to go through the details right now. Next slide, please. Similarly, this is scientific issues with the meta-analysis and global issues. The previous one was on the State of the Science report. But similarly, there was a lot of discussion about the epidemiologic data and the dose response information that was available. For example, in this specific comment here, 6A, reviewer 6A, comment H, the reviewer felt that, quote, the strength of evidence and specificity of the meta-analysis manuscript conclusions were overstated. She states, given the lack of a direct measure of dose over time and exposure limitations of the available evidence. Now, the MTP authors noted the consistency of their meta-analysis with 2 other publications available at that time. They also felt their discussion section clearly addressed the limitation of a mean effects meta-analysis, including the way in which exposure is measured. So the authors rebutted this comment. The Board of Scientific Counselors in reviewing this generally found that the response was inadequate and made a recommendation that the discussion section of the meta-analysis manuscript should include an explicit statement acknowledging the lack of a direct measure of dose and describing the potential impact on the study's conclusions. And in this instance, the working group actually offered a specific example for the author's considerations. We're not telling them what they have to write. We provide an example which reads, we acknowledge that the lack of a direct measure of dose limits our ability to determine the shape of the dose-response relationship between fluoride and children's IQ. So that's an example of where the working group made a very specific recommendation. Next slide, please. Again, continuing the scientific issues and the meta-analysis, more comments around the whole issue of dose and dose response. And here the working group also recommended that the NTP authors better address what is known and what is not known about the dose response and the shape of the dose response curve and the limitations of the epidemiologic data in addressing these points. And importantly, what is the importance of this lack of knowledge in understanding the magnitude of impact, especially at lower doses? Next slide. Continuing on with the same basic issue with some other reviewer comments, from across reviewer comments, evidence in the meta-analysis manuscripts includes, one reviewer noted, few high-quality prospective studies, few high-quality studies with low and lower fluoride levels, and few studies outside of Asia. And this was a comment of one specific reviewer. And the working group recommended that the NTP authors address the adequacy of evidence, both the number and the quality of studies in the low dose range, and provide interpretations of these models. So again, further comments related largely to dose response and the meta-analysis. Next slide, please. Additional comments where the working group made recommendations, reviewer 6B, comment T. Just to read a specific comment, the assumption for a random effect model is that the true effects in different studies represent a random sample from some population. And they note that the majority of the studies are from one country or one region of the world in Asia with unique environmental, economic, and social political conditions, and argue that this needs to be considered in the final analysis. And the NTP authors, while they agreed with this comment, and they respond, which is why they investigated potential sources of heterogeneity. Well, the working group considered that the meta-analysis manuscript was limited in its ability to investigate heterogeneity by country, and recommends that authors be more explicit about heterogeneity and address reviewers' concerns and discuss heterogeneity in the strengths and limitations sections of the meta-analysis, and how lack of reduction of heterogeneity in subgroup analysis might affect the conclusion. So again, it's more in-depth discussion of the limitations of studies that contribute to their conclusions. Reviewer 5, comment I, asked the authors to acknowledge the weaknesses in the subjective way publication bias was assessed. And the authors responded, NTP authors, that the discussion of approaches and limitations of tests to evaluate potential for publication bias was described in the methods section, and the BSC working group noted that, but recommended that the authors add to the strength and limitations section a statement such as, we acknowledge publication bias may exist, and if it does, the impact on the study conclusions would be the following, and then try to provide some specific analysis of what the importance of publication bias in this instance would be. Next slide. Again, continuing with scientific issues on the meta-analysis manuscript. This is the last scientific issue related to the meta-analysis. And the working group had some uncertainty or concerns about how the meta-regression analysis in the draft manuscript was actually done, and commented that, quote, the dose-response analysis between total fluoride intake and children's IQ that seemingly underlies the NTP author's conclusions is not well described in the draft meta-analysis, and also noted that we were under the impression that the dose-response analysis conducted was on data that was pooled across different studies rather than analyses of dose response within specific studies. At least that was how our reviewers evaluated this or read this, evaluators. Based on this, the working group made some specific recommendations to more fully describe the dose response mean effects meta-analysis. Next slide, please. So moving on to the second category of global issues, so we moved out of sort of scientific specific issues and relating to sufficiency of information provided in both the State of the Science monograph and the meta-analysis. The working group noted that the two documents do not cover the same literature timeframe, although the meta-analysis was conducted as part of the larger systematic review reported in the State of the Science monograph. So for example, the State of the Science monograph, the authors covered literature through May 2020, and the meta-analysis was through November of 2021. And a couple of different reviewers made some comments about this. One reviewer, A2, noted that there was a newer paper, Eberluzia et al. In 2021, that this should be added. Now, appropriately, the NTP author said, well, that was beyond the cutoff for our literature for the State of the Science monograph, which is a challenge when you do a systematic review. You define a date, and so they were correct in that, and yet the reviewers felt that was an important paper that needed to be discussed. In review 2D there, I won't read that, the author said they did update the meta-analysis literature in November of 2021, but again, not the systematic review at that date. And the working group felt that if you're relying on a systematic review in one document for another, that the dates should be consistent and they should be the same between the two documents. Here, one second. And that we also noted that it has been the intent of the authors to submit the meta-analysis as written as a manuscript to a journal, and the working group noted that it's pretty likely that the journal, considering this paper, would want the literature updated, and that's just sort of a fact of life that they need to consider if they are intending to submit this for publication. Next slide, please. Related to that topic, we felt that it was important if these documents, because if they were continuing as separate documents, that they really needed to be standalone. because referring methods from one to the other is problematic if the other one isn't published or isn't available, and vice versa. And so we have a couple of major recommendations here that said that if you're going to continue with two different documents, you're going to have some redundancy in methodologies between these so that those two papers stand alone and one isn't dependent upon the other in citation, because it might not in fact be available depending on whether it's accessible or not. And so this whole issue of the document standing alone we felt was important. And this was raised by a number of different reviewers in different places that you will see here on the screen. Next slide, please. Another issue on sufficiency of information, one of the reviewers, reviewer G, comment 20, said that the NTP authors should talk about higher exposures to fluoride, not just exposure to fluoride. Everyone is exposed to fluoride, so describing the at-risk group as being exposed to fluoride is meaningless and perhaps confusing. And the NTP authors said they added the higher qualifier when appropriate to describe fluoride exposure. So they made some changes in that comment and then provided a benchmark, which they used as 1.5 milligrams per liter, which is the WHO guidelines for drinking water quality. And they said to aid in describing total exposures above which moderate confidence was determined for children's IQ studies. And while the working group felt that was an appropriate addition, we recommended that the authors better describe what that benchmark dose means. So they picked this benchmark dose, but they don't discuss it in any great detail. That they need to discuss what it means and how it's related to their studies they reviewed, or consider a different way to frame their data and conclusions around this dose of, in this instance, 1.5 milligrams per liter. Next slide, please. And now, again, on the sufficiency of information, focused specifically on the meta-analysis, the authors thought that the NTP authors appropriately acknowledged the limitations of their meta-analysis for, quote, not being designed to address the broader public health implications of water fluoride in the United States. And if you look again at the blueprint here in the slide in response to 7A, we do agree that federal effort to examine the overall cost benefit or risk benefit of current fluoride exposure and oral health is an appropriate next step. And there is a precedent for this. In addition to the pre-publication of the 2022 monograph, the results of our meta-analysis would be a necessary component of a comprehensive effort to quantify risks in any larger public health risk-benefit evaluation of fluoride. And the working group felt that this was a very important point, a very important comment. The purpose of these is focused on hazard assessment and is not a risk-benefit analysis, as the authors pointed out. We made a number of suggestions here focused around that topic that they might add text. And for example, this is where they provide text in the response, and we think that text really should be in the document or should be in the manuscript, okay? And so we have made suggestions to that effect, that they should add the statements they put in their response into the manuscript. Next slide, please. Again, on sufficiency of information, the authors had updated the discussion section to include new relevant literature. But again, we have this somewhat catch-22 of the rules of systematic review, where you define an end date, and we simply noted, without doing a detailed search of the literature, that just within a quick look there were a couple of relatively new papers that were highly relevant, and that it would be difficult to see these manuscripts and state of the science reviews being published without addressing some of these reports. And I give two examples here, but I emphasize here that we did not do an evaluation of all the existing literature, but these popped up as being obvious and important papers that probably need to be considered, especially if they intend to publish these either a state of the science or in a journal. Next slide, please. Going on to the next global issue of precision of text. This is a challenging area when you talk about analyses of different studies that had different metrics for dose and different measurements of what's high versus higher or low or lower. And we felt there was some confusion, as did some of as pointed out by several of the reviewers. And we suggested that the authors replace where they use the term higher with either relatively high or high when referring to the association of fluoride exposure and low children's IQ, unless the comparator is stated. For example, if they're specifically comparing it to the WHO 1.5 milligram document, then you know what they're talking about. And so is in these examples of reviewer comment I-23 and 8M, one in the state of the science and one in meta-analysis, replacing higher with relatively high or higher or high. And there are a number of places throughout the document where we point this out. Okay, next slide, please. Another example where the working group recommends using more precise text is when referring to assessment of exposure. And we say this because in these studies, exposure can be assessed or evaluated indirectly via use of biomarkers, for example, measure of fluoride in urine or fluoride in blood or fluoride in water. But it's seldom, if exposure is seldom, if ever, actually measured. And so we talk about assessment of exposure versus saying exposure. And thus we say adding the term assessment when referring to exposure measurement and metrics. Okay. And again, this has to do with precision of text. Next slide, please. There were, again, a number of comments. I'm not going to go through these in detail here, but examples of where reviewers pointed out some uncertainties about what they meant by the term exposure. And importantly, there needs to be a bit more clarity, although the authors do say this in a few places. They really need to emphasize that when they're talking about exposure, they are talking about total exposure to fluoride and not just exposure to fluoride from drinking water. And we have a number of places here where we suggest that they make this. Again, another example of where the authors state in a response, while drinking water provides the majority of fluoride exposure in many studies, total exposure can vary widely, even in optimally fluoridated areas based on personal habits in the case of dental products and consumption of beverages such as black tea that can contain fluoride. And that is a great response to the author's comment, but it should be in the document rather than just being in a response to the authors. Here we again come back to the WHO guideline comparison, and we suggest that where they made a specific recommendation that they actually put that in there. They say the review finds with moderate confidence that higher fluoride exposures is consistently associated with lower IQ. We think that they need to be very explicit what they mean by higher. For example, in putting into the text, i.e. total fluoride exposure that approximates or exceeds the WHO guidelines for drinking water quality of 1.5. Again, precision of text. Next slide, please. In this instance, again, of using more precise text, the working group recommends that the NTP authors consistently replace their use of the term effects with the term association in referring to relationships between outcomes and fluoride exposures. So, for example, in comment C60, they would change and propose as additional text to clarify that the body of evidence is on inverse associations between total fluoride exposure and IQ in children. And so effects versus association is an example of important precisions in the text, again, in both documents. And this example, the state of the science. In the final fourth category of global issues, which is around research needs, there were a number of reviewers that said that they should comment about or have something to do with a call for additional research. And the working group recommends that including this call for research in the meta-analysis manuscript is appropriate, and pointed to text in the NTP authors' responses. They responded in response to reviewer 2P, uncertainty of biological mechanisms that could explain the apparent inverse association. So that's an area where there is our research needs is around mechanism. And in 6B, comment L, we agreed with the caveat from the authors that said that targeted research could add clarity to the existing data, particularly at lower exposure levels. And so again, what they recommended or responded we think is appropriate, but it really belongs in the text. Next slide, please. Sorry, I gotta go to the next slide. Oh, I think I got behind here. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I just got off my slides here. Okay, so just to summarize this report, which if you've looked at it is rather lengthy, we looked at over 400 comments, evaluated the adequacy of the reviewer's response to each and every one of these comments. In general, we found that the authors had done an adequate job of responding to the majority of these. And we pointed out, however, areas where we thought that the scientific veracity and strength of the document could be improved, and both the scientific, the state of the science monograph, and especially perhaps in the meta-analysis, which are much more complicated papers to do. It's not particularly surprising that that area would find less agreement. And that we think that the authors overall did a very good job in responding to these, but there are a number of areas where we think that the revisions to the text need to be made to strengthen the veracity and clarity of this document. With that, I would like to take an opportunity to thank all of you and the Board of Scientific Counselors for listening in on this briefing. I would especially like to thank Dr. Wolf and her contract staff for, I can't imagine how many hours they spent putting all this stuff together. It was kind of my idea on how we should do this, and that left them with a great deal of work in terms of coding and redacting all of these comments that were then made available to the committee. And of course, thank the committee for their incredible effort in reviewing all of this. And I would say that all of the some 20-some phone calls or virtual meetings we had, there was a lot of really good discussion, and in every instance we were able to reach consensus, and I'm very proud that we have a consensus report here from what I think were 9 other really outstanding scientists. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Dr. Gray. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for that really detailed presentation that outlined both your process and some of the important findings. I want to take questions from the Board of Scientific Counselors now. If you have any clarification questions, we will have more discussion later. So right now it's just clarifying questions, and please use the Zoom raise hand function. And while we wait to see if anyone does, I wonder if just since this is a public meeting, you could comment on a statement you made there at the end about the difference between a meta-analysis and the state of the science, why you would see different levels of certainty or agreement in your comments, the 87% versus the 65%.
Well, and I'm not an epidemiologist, but I've become somewhat acquainted with the process of meta-analysis, and I think most people understand, listening in, that meta-analysis are taking multiple different studies and trying to combine them and redo a study based on original data from multiple different studies, and those studies aren't designed exactly the same way. And so when you get into trying to pool data and compare it, there's a great deal of uncertainty. And in epidemiology studies, there's a great deal of uncertainty in how you assess exposure, and there will be different metrics of exposure by different papers. There are different statistical approaches on how you pool the data. And I guess I would just say the whole point of that is that this is a very complex, scientifically complex area in doing meta-analyses. And I would be delighted to, if any of my people that really know about how you do meta-analyses and the challenges of that might offer some insights. So I would open this up to any of the committee members that were here that are familiar with and have done meta-analysis to perhaps expand on my sort of global comment there. Anyone?
I don't see anyone coming onto video or raising hand, but I did just want to make sure that the working group members heard Dr. Eaton's invitation to speak to meta-analysis. I found I think your description was probably helpful for public audiences, so I think we're good if no one wants to chime in now. Okay, so board members, I haven't seen any of you raise hands. So I'm going to take that to mean that you do not at present have clarifying questions for Dr. Eaton. And in that case, I believe we will move into our public comment section of the agenda, yes. So the NTP received 12 public comments. I believe we're going to, just a second, we will get a slide up that acknowledges who submitted comments. Okay, so we have that now. So we received 12 written public comments, and these are all available to the public on the meeting webpage, and they were provided to the Board of Scientific Counselors members in advance of the meeting, and we have reviewed them. So thank you to all who took time to provide comments. And then we will move to the oral comment section of this meeting. And we received 9 requests to present oral public comments. So commenters will join the Zoom meeting to present their comments, and each person will have up to 5 minutes. And because we have a full roster of people, you are limited to 5 minutes, and I will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining. I'll just jump in. I'll apologize in advance for that interruption, but that way, if you're not where you thought you could be, you can speed up so you can make all of the remarks you wish to in the 5-minute time. And then we will cut you off at 5 minutes so we can move to the next presenter. Any other procedural issues before we start with comment? Okay, our first commenter, and I will also apologize if I misstate anyone's name when I introduce you. You can, of course, introduce yourself and correct me when you join. So our first commenter is Michael Connett. That's different than what's up here. Yeah, well, Connett. That's different than what's... Sorry, I was looking at the written public commenter slide, but we're ready for Mr. Connett. Connett?
Yep.
Great. That's different than what's... Sorry, I was looking at the written public commenter slide, but we're ready for Mr. Connett.
Yep.
Great.
That's different than what's...
Sorry, I was looking at the written public commenter slide, but we're ready for Mr. Connett. We're having some technical difficulty,
Yep.
Mr. Connett. Don't worry, your time has not started.
That's different than what's...
Sorry, I was looking at the written public commenter slide, but we're ready for Mr. Connett. We're having some technical difficulty.
So if you could
Mr. Connett,
please
don't
mute
worry, your time has not
your
started.
Zoom.
That's different Oh, than you what's... know what? Sorry, I think it's because I had the YouTube video
Yes.
on. Might have been
Okay,
causing a
now you're
feedback.
good. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Good afternoon, members of the BSC. I am an environmental health attorney who represents plaintiffs in a federal court case that is currently exploring whether fluoride added to drinking water poses a neurodevelopmental risk. A few years ago, in the summer of 2020, we had a trial, and the court heard compelling expert testimony from Dr. Bruce Lanphier, Dr. Howard Hu, Dr. Philippe Grandjean, and Dr. Kathleen Thiessen. At the end of our trial, the judge agreed that current science, especially the NIH-funded birth cohort studies from Canada and Mexico, raise, quote, serious questions, unquote, about the safety of fluoridation chemicals in water. But before rendering a final conclusion, the judge wanted to consider the findings of NTP's review. And so he placed the case on hold to await NTP's release of the monograph. And so we waited. And while we waited, we filed FOIA requests to understand why it was taking so long. And I'd like to share with you some of what we have learned. First, we have learned through the FOIA documents that NTP's staff scientists have done and are doing an admirable job standing up for scientific integrity in the face of intense and sustained political pressures. And I think we should all be grateful for that because it has not been easy. The FOIA documents show that the pressure on NTP is coming from agencies with very strong partisan interests on fluoride, including the CDC's Division of Oral Health and NIDCR. These agencies have been working hand in glove with private lobbyists and PR professionals to smear and discredit the NTP's work at almost every turn. These pressures came to a head last May after NTP's monograph successfully cleared external peer review by 5 independent scientists. The FOIA documents show that NTP's scientists unequivocally considered the monograph to be complete and ready for publication in May of 2022. After 6 years of work, this should have been a moment to celebrate. But when NTP broke this news to CDC and NIDCR, it was like a code red emergency. The CDC and NIDCR immediately maneuvered to prevent the monograph from being released. And they succeeded in doing so by convincing political leadership at HHS to quash the report. The then scientific director at the NTP, Dr. Brian Berridge, made clear his misgivings about the political pressure. In an email obtained through FOIA, Dr. Berridge wrote, and I quote, "After 17 years in industry, I've seen efforts to modify messages to fit commercial interests. I wasn't party to that there, and I'm not game to do that here," unquote.
You have 1 minute.
And that is why we are here today, because agencies that aggressively promoted the addition of fluoridation chemicals to drinking water for over 50 years did not like NTP's science-based conclusions and had the political power to quash the report. I'd ask you to ask yourself this: is this how you think the NTP should be treated, where NTP monographs will only be released if the conclusions are compliant with the policy preferences of federal agencies? What kind of precedent does this establish for NTP's future reviews? In closing, I hope we would all agree that NTP should follow the science wherever it leads, even if it contradicts long-held policy preferences. This is what NTP staff scientists have endeavored to do
Your
over
time
these
is up,
past
Mr.
6
Comment.
years under very difficult circumstances, and I hope you will support NTP in this important public endeavor. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments. After each commenter, we will ask the Board of Scientific Counselors if you have any clarifying questions, and if not, we will move to the next commenter. Please use the raise hand function in Zoom if you have any questions for the commenter. Vina, Go ahead. Dr. Singla, sorry. Wait, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Vina Singla with Natural Resources Defense Council. Thank you for the comments. And my question is, will the documents that were obtained by your FOIA be made available?
Mr. Connett, are you still, is he still in the room? Oh, okay. Dr. Singla, he is not in the room, so the commenters are just in the room for their 5 minutes, and then really I think the opportunity is just for us to identify questions that we can come back to. So thank you. I will note that question. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no additional questions, I do have a process question. So should we have the commenters stay in the room for? Yep, so can we bring? Oh, great. Okay, super. So Mr. Connett, you're back. I don't know if you were streaming and you could see that there was a question posed to you.
Yes, thank you for that. I'm sorry, I got cut out there. Yes, we are happy to make all of the documents available that we have received through FOIA. And however, and I'm happy to, if anyone from the committee wants to contact us, I'm happy to provide that to the committee.
Thank you for that, and perhaps we could get instruction on how those would best be made available. We'll follow up. Someone from the staff will follow up with you, Mr. Connett, about how to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we appreciate that. And we're going to move to the next commenter in the interest of time. And I see on the list Chris Nurath. Is Chris in the Zoom? Okay, he's just been, they've just been admitted, so give a second. Okay, I see Chris. You have 5 minutes to share your oral comments with us, and we do have a timer running, and I'll alert you at 1 minute left, all right? Go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Chris Nurath, and I'm representing the American Environmental Health Studies Project. I want to thank the NTP for holding this public meeting. I'm going to talk about what the NTP's systematic review has found and some of its implications. But first, I want to give my support to the BSC Workgroup's review. I concur with the majority of the workgroup's 466 comments. In the relatively small percentage where the workgroup offered suggestions, they were mostly for increasing the clarity of the reports. Having myself been accused of being a perfectionist, I can appreciate efforts to try to get the wording of the NTP's reports just right. But there are diminishing returns as well as competing interests at play. By summarizing what NTP's systematic review has found, I believe that will help explain why there has been so much pushback and why this NTP report has been so long delayed. Next slide, please. What did the NTP find? Next slide. The NTP used its OHAT methodology and reached a moderate confidence conclusion for developmental neurotoxicity based on human studies. OHAT specifies that when there is moderate confidence from human studies and there is a relatively large and consistent body of evidence, that would also support a presumed hazard conclusion. Next slide, please. Did the NTP find a relatively large and consistent body of evidence? Next slide. Yes, 52 of 55 studies found reduction in IQ associated with fluoride, as did 18 of 19 studies rated low risk of bias. NTP also said that subgroup analyses by sex, age group, study location, outcome assessment, exposure assessment further support the consistent and robust pattern of fluoride and lowered IQ. Next slide. And you can skip this one to the next slide and skip this one as well. Dose response. Did NTP find a safe threshold. Next slide. Quote, there was no obvious threshold as illustrated by the figure. Next slide. This is a graph from the meta-analysis manuscript showing the meta-dose response relationship between IQ and water fluoride level. Next slide. I've converted the y-axis scale from SMD to IQ points, which will be more familiar to more people. The graph shows no evidence of a threshold at 1.5 or even 0.7 milligrams per liter, and the loss of IQ at those levels is substantial. 0.7 milligrams per liter is the level commonly used in artificial fluoridation. Next slide. This compares the dose-response relationship NTP found for fluoride in IQ to that for childhood lead in IQ found in a well-known pooled study. The dose-response curves and effect sizes are quite similar. Next slide. When an HHS agency commenter tried to argue that the moderate confidence conclusion was based solely on studies with higher fluoride exposures than occur in the United States, the NTP corrected them, saying, the confidence assessment also includes findings from studies with fluoride exposures that are similar to or lower than those associated with optimally fluoridated water supplies. Next slide. Summarizing the NTP findings, moderate confidence of developmental neurotoxicity, large and very consistent body of evidence, no safe threshold observed, moderate confidence conclusion applies to fluoridated water. Next slide.
You have 1 minute left.
No wonder the divisions of HHS that promote fluoridation have tried to alter, delay, and suppress the NTP evaluation. Next slide. You can skip that one. So, my request to the BSC members is to please uphold the scientific integrity of the NTP and its dedicated staff. Read the NTP report. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Does anyone on the BSC have clarifying questions? Oh, okay. I don't see any clarifying questions, so I will thank the commenter, and I want to go to Dr. Wolf because she does have an answer for the question that Dr. Singla raised about gaining access to those FOIA documents.
So yes, those documents are actually posted in the NIH FOIA library under the electronics section, and we will share that information with the board members, and we'll also include that in the minutes to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next commenter is David Kennedy. Is Mr. Kennedy? Yep, I see Mr. Kennedy in the Zoom room. So go ahead, you have 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when you have 1 minute left. You are on mute, I believe, Mr. Kennedy. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay, go ahead. Please start your comments, and we're going to start your clock now. I'll let you know when you have 1 minute left.
Yes, good afternoon. And I'm David Kennedy. I'm representing the Preventive Dental Health Association. And that, and next slide, let's move the slides along rapidly. Would like, again, to echo Chris Narath's remarks that we appreciate the integrity of the BSC review and your willingness to follow the science. Next slide. Paradigms are hard to change, especially when there's money behind them. Lead was introduced in '29, and it's still in aviation fuels today. Next slide. Baby food, drinking fountains, etc. The old toxicology was if it didn't kill you, it wouldn't hurt you. That was disproven by more recent toxicology. A little bit of data will ruin a perfectly good theory. It should not take 50 years to get a deadly poison out of the water supply. But it does, and the reasons are obvious. Money. Next slide. The risk assessment we conducted, PADHA conducted in 1997 with 3 days of testimony, an army of scientists, and that same year concluded the same as you have. Next slide. The increased risk of fluoride with increased intake. Next slide. This is the Metropolitan Water District who invited Kathleen Thiessen. Next slide. Next slide. Infants get a lot of water. Next slide. Can you just keep moving along with me? Yeah, there you go. And so water intake, that's a log scale on the bottom. Next slide. Right there is the EPA's reference dose. Here's the water intake in milligrams per kilogram per day with fluoride. Next slide. From the National Academy of Science Review, these are the points where they've noted there is a departure point from health for neurotoxicity, dental fluorosis, skeletal fluorosis, glucose metabolism, and that you can see all of these are way above the EPA's reference dose, which brings to question whether the EPA succumbed to political pressure to come up with a false reference dose. Next slide. The known effect levels are exceeded by many of the population. Next slide, said Dr. Thiessen to the Metropolitan Water District before they added fluoride to 18 million people's water. In other words, the reference dose does not protect most. Next slide. Fluoride sources are included as you did, and more people will exceed it. The list of adverse effects does not include cancer, and there's probably a cancer-promoting effect, if not a cancer-causing effect. Next slide. Next slide. Director of Laboratories said in 1956, next slide, it's obvious from the knowledge of fluoride toxicity that such factors of safety cannot be established when fluoride is added to the public water supply at the level recommended by the proponent of fluoridation. Next slide. It must be concluded that the fluoridation of public water supplies is a hazardous procedure. People are bound to get hurt. It remains to find out how many and when. That you have begun to identify one of the causes for the disruption in our society today with children with learning disorders, ATD, ADSD, and all manner of neurological impairment. There is no reason to put a neurotoxin in the water supply unless you have a lot of it to get rid of. Who would that be? That would be our military. It's a byproduct, hydrofluorosilicic acid, of making nuclear weapons. That's why we get the big pushback from our military industrial complex who have captured agencies in our government. The CDC,
you have 1 minute left.
Thank you. All dental directors throughout the United States perceive as their duty to promote fluoridation. We could save hundreds of millions of dollars every year by simply firing all of those people who think it's their job to destroy this country with chemicals in the water supply and instead promote hygiene and oral health with using natural products and good food, free of contaminants, pesticides, and toxins. And I thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for following the science. It's really clear, has been for a long time, and you've identified it for the rest of the public to understand. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I'll ask the Board of Scientific Counselors if you have any clarifying questions. And I don't see any hands raised, so thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Our next commenter is William Hersey. Is Mr. Hersey in the Zoom room yet? Mr. Hersey, if you're in the Zoom room, maybe turn on your video. Oh, okay. He's connecting to audio. And I think Mr. Kennedy should, okay, he's no longer in the room, good. We're having some trouble connecting Mr. Hersey, so we're looking to see if the next, oh, is he ready? Okay. Okay. Mr. Hersey, are you there? Okay, we're going to move to the next commenter, and we will come back to Mr. Hersey. So the next person on the list is Paul Connett. And I see his video and connecting to audio, so let's just give a second. Okay, Mr. Connett, I can see you, and it looks like you're connected to audio now, so you will have 5 minutes to share your comments with us, and I will give you a warning when you have 1 minute left. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, my name is Paul Connett, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Fluoride Action Network, for which I was the former director. Next slide. I'm a retired professor of chemistry who specializes in... I can see you, and it looks like you're connected to audio now, so you will have 5 minutes to share your comments with us, and I will give you a warning when you have 1 minute left. Go ahead. Can I start again then? Thank you.
So you need to disconnect from the
Hello,
live
my name
stream.
is Paul Connett, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Fluoride Action Network, for which I was the former director. Next slide.
Mr. Connett, can you just...
Professor of chemistry and specialized in... You're connected to audio now.
Okay, try again now. We're trying to work on the tech on this end. Go ahead and unmute and let's try again. We think that we have a solution to the echoing. Say something.
Hello.
Okay, so if you want to go back to the beginning, we'll start your clock again.
I'm trying to disconnect the... All right.
We're trying to...
My son is helping me.
Work on the tech on this end. Go ahead and unmute.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
So, I'm sorry about that. I'm a retired professor of chemistry who specialized in environmental chemistry and toxicology. I've spent the last 27 years, since 1996, researching fluoride's toxicity and the water fluoridation debate. My arguments are summarized in the book. Next slide. Next slide. I got involved with the fluoridation debate in 1996, which coincided with the publication of the first 2 Chinese studies published in English, and 1 year after publication of Mullenix's seminal animal study on fluoride and behavior. Shortly after the publication of her study, Mullenix was fired from the Forsyth Dental Center. Thus began my ringside view of the endless scientific punch versus political counterpunch on fluoride's neurotoxicity, which has continued for the last 27 years. The latest political counterpunch, which has been revealed by FOIA documents, has been the attempt by pro-fluoridation entities within the HHS to suppress the NTP review. For scientists like myself, the NTP and its parent body, the NIEHS, occupy a special place in public health. It is not burdened with making policy, so its researchers can focus on the science underlying toxicological issues. It is imperative that this role be rigorously protected by BSC from special interest. In my view, it is extremely dangerous for the health of this nation when a wedge is driven between honest science and public health policy. Such a wedge undermines the public's trust. Now I want to do 3 things. First, point out a serious mistake in the working group's review of the NTP report. Read a short excerpt from a statement by Dr. Linda Birnbaum. And third, give my own plea to the BSC. First, the BSC mistake. Would you go to slide number 18, please? Thank you. On the slide, you'll see a number in the third sentence from the bottom, minus 0.46. Now, the working group says this is equivalent to half an IQ point. In actual fact, it's equivalent to 7 IQ points because the 0.46 refers to a standard deviation of 15. So 0.46 times 15 is 7 IQ points, not insignificant. Now, this is not the first time this mistake has been made, but it's usually made by pro-fluoridation commentators. Now, please go to slide number 22. This is the statement by Dr. Linda Birnbaum. I'm just taking the first paragraph. As someone who believes deeply in NTP's science-based mission, I am concerned by the recent course of events with the fluoride monograph. The decision to set aside the results of an external peer review process based on concerns expressed by agencies with strong policy interests on fluoride suggests the presence of political interference in what should be strictly a scientific endeavor. Next slide. Now, my message to the BSc, please protect the NTP and the NIEHS from political interference. Please provide one place where honest science can inform public health policy. We know this is not happening in some other regulatory bodies. Please allow the public to have one entity in which they can trust when it comes to the toxicity of chemicals which impact their daily lives. Now, I believe that over the last 6 years, the NTP team, science team, has done an excellent job of reviewing the literature on fluoride's neurotoxicity.
You have 1 minute left.
Thank you. To all the commentary and criticism it has received. Thus, I hope the BSc will recommend prompt publication of the NTP's May 18th monograph or the later one and meta-analysis. At most, a few minor word changes may be needed, but nothing, please, to justify more delays or more political interference. Can you go back, please, to slide number 20? I want you to stare at those studies on this page. They were all funded by the NIEHS and some other federal agencies. They were all done in communities with either water fluoridation at 0.6 or 0.7 parts per million, or they were done at equivalent doses. That is the basic. You cannot flush those down the toilet. All the stuff we've heard today does not deny the fact that
Your
all
time
these
is up,
studies, the highest
Mr. Conant.
quality studies, have been done at less than 1.5 parts per million. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and I will again ask the board if anyone has clarifying questions for Mr. Conant. Okay, I don't see any questions, so thank you, Mr. Conant. And we're actually going to go backwards to William Hersey, who we had trouble connecting with earlier. I believe he's on deck, so as soon as we see him here in the Zoom room, we'll turn to him. Oh, okay. It seems like we're going to have to come back to him again because we're not finding him right now. So next person on the list is Rick North. Okay, he is joining. Yep, okay, I see Rick North. So you'll have 5 minutes for your comments, and I will give you a warning when you have 1 minute left. So go ahead. You're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Rick North, representing as a private citizen, not representing a group. My background is in nonprofit health management, 21 years to the American Cancer Society, the last 5 as CEO of the Oregon chapter, and 7 years with Physicians for Social Responsibility before retiring. I'm not a physician, scientist, or dentist, but for more than a decade, I've collaborated with a large group of them all over North America, firmly opposing water fluoridation. I'd like to comment on the NTP report through the lens of a layperson. Fluoridation defenders say it must be proven harmful before stopping it. I believe this is backwards. It's the same argument that was used by the lead and tobacco industries. I believe any chemical added to the public drinking water to affect one's health should first be proven safe. First, do no harm, better safe than sorry. Fluoride at levels in fluoridated water hasn't been proven safe. On the contrary, NTP found substantial evidence it's harmful. In 2006, the National Research Council published its landmark review, Fluoride in Drinking Water, the most comprehensive authoritative review of fluoride's toxicity ever written. It found unequivocally, quote, "It is apparent that fluorides have the ability to interfere with the functions of the brain and the body," unquote. It examined 5 IQ studies in China, all linking higher fluoride with lower IQ. Even with the study's limitations, the committee concluded, quote, "The consistency of the collective results warrants additional research," unquote. This flatly contradicts the prevailing narrative from the CDC, American Dental Association, and groups that follow them that fluoridation is proven safe. That conclusion was based on just 5 studies. In 2012, a Harvard meta-analysis found that in 26 out of 27 studies, children ingesting higher fluoride levels tested an average of, as you just heard, 7 IQ points lower. Most had higher concentrations in US water, but many had total exposures comparable to millions of Americans. Today, NTP's meta-analysis linked higher fluoride in 52 out of 55 studies to lower IQs. The consistency is irrefutable. No one can credibly argue that fluoride has been proven safe. But it's not just quantity and consistency, it's quality. The NTP found this link in 18 out of 19 highest quality studies. The BSC working group commented that, quote, "There are few high quality prospective studies, few high quality studies with low fluoride levels, and few studies outside of Asia. There may be fewer studies, but NTP determined, quote, several of the highest quality studies showing lower IQs in children were done in optimally fluoridated areas, 0.7, unquote. When looking at all the science and all the comments from outside reviewers, NTP concluded, quote, "We have no basis on which to state that our findings are not relevant to some children or pregnant people in the United States." Even the epidemiologist hired by the EPA to defend fluoridation in the current lawsuit acknowledged what she considered the 4 strongest studies ever done. All were funded by NIH, all showed serious cognitive harm, all were from outside Asia, and all were at levels in fluoridated water. The dose makes the poison, so can age and sex. With fluoridation, the toxic dose that pregnant women and children ingest
You have 1 minute left.
Thank you. Depends incredibly on how thirsty they are. The very foundation of fluoridation, administering a drug through drinking water, is absurd. This emperor has no clothes. Everyday fluoridation continues means thousands of babies are born at risk of permanent brain damage, especially low-income families that can't afford bottled water or expensive filters to avoid it. NTP has researched this subject thoroughly for 6 years. They are the experts. The report and meta-analysis, liberated from political interference, should be released by NTP as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I'll again ask the board members if you have any clarifying questions. And seeing no raised hands, I'll just say thank you again, and we'll move to our next commenter on the list. I still think we don't have Mr. Hersey, so we will go to Bill Osmundson, and you'll have 5 minutes,
Yes.
and I'll give you a 1-minute warning.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you
Okay,
and we can see
thank
you.
First slide. My name is Bill Osmondson. I'm a dentist with Masters in Public Health. I'm representing Washington Action for Safe Water. And in 2015, I nominated fluoride, which is an authority-administered, depends on who you talk to, drug, or by the FDA. And EPA says it's a contaminant. Now the hot potato has been pushed over to the NTP. I also nominated fluoride for cancer and thyroid reviews. There are about 20 risks and known harms from fluoride. At this rate of 8 years, it's going to take about 160 years for us to go through all the different problems with fluoride, let alone the thousands of other toxins. Thank you for 8 years of your lives on one risk. Next slide. Remember, the voters vote on fluoride, so we need to keep all of the terms or the conclusions in a simple takeaway for the voters, because governments don't like to take responsibility for this. It's too complex for governments. We need to have it simple for the voters. I and other dentists treat dental fluorosis, a known cosmetic and functional harm, about 30 times more costly in damage than the treatment, than the disease prevented. 2 out of 3 children have dental fluorosis. Next slide, please. The EPA scientists have what I would consider to be the most accurate and simple statement. In summary, we hold that fluoridation is an unreasonable risk. That is, the toxicity of fluoride is so great and the purported benefits associated with it are so small, if there are any at all. And I struggled on that one as a dentist who promoted fluoridation because I thought I saw it benefit in my patients. But I was looking at other confounding factors. They're requiring every man, woman, and child in America to ingest at borders on criminal behavior on the part of governments. I agree with that statement, except for borders. Next slide. Thank you very much for the recommendations made by the BSC. I think they're good. I encourage you to follow them. Here are some more recommendations. Number 1, fluoride is highly toxic with a probable toxic dose estimated at 5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Fluoride is a known neurotoxin. The question is dosage. What is the known no-effect dosage? What is the benchmark dose? Fluoride is exempt from toxic and poison laws when regulated as a pesticide or drug. Topical fluoride in toothpaste went through the drug approval regulatory process, and the label refers to a 1/4 milligram, which equals a large glass of water, fluoridated water. The drug facts include warning: FDA approved. Keep out of reach of children under 6 years of age. If more than used for brushing and is accidentally swallowed, get medical help or contact the Poison Control Center right away. Directions: adults and children 2 years and older, do not swallow. What about the words "do not swallow" is tough, except for my spelling, of course. To minimize swallowing, use a pea-sized amount in children under 6, supervised children. Next slide, please. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration defines a drug in part as substance intended for prevention of disease. Fluoride is well known that its intent is to prevent disease. Topical fluoride has FDA approval, NDA, CDR approval, with a label "do not swallow," reasonably consistent with the monographs MA that we've been under discussion. Third recommendation, that mothers who are pregnant or want to become pregnant and children under the age of 6, these subpopulations.
You have 1 minute left.
Avoid drinking water with fluoride concentrations over 0.2 milligrams per liter. Do not swallow fluoridated toothpaste and avoid foods and beverages high in fluoride. Caregivers of infants should avoid mixing formula with water containing more than 0.01 milligrams per liter of fluoride. Mother's milk is about 0.004 when it is detected. Next slide, please. The NTP recommended an uncertainty or intraspecific factor of 10. The NTP needs to protect more than just the statistical mean. Some are chemically sensitive, don't excrete fluoride as well, etc. Some drink 10 times as much water as others. And the EPA uses their MCLG at 90% of the population. They're only planning to protect 90% of the population. Those that are drinking the most water, they
time
don't
is up.
They don't include infants. And number 5, the NTP reconciled the disconnect or disagreement between the SOS and which appears to be safe at below 1.5 milligrams per liter.
Mr. Osmundson, I'm going to have to cut you off. Your time is up, and I want to allow time for everybody to comment. So BSC members, I'm going to ask you again, do you have clarifying questions for Mr. Osmundson? And seeing no hands raised, it looks like we do have Mr. Hersey now. Yes? Okay, so great.
I hope that I'm...
Go ahead.
Am I off mute? Can you hear me?
You're off mute and we can see you, so you will have 5 minutes and I'll give you a 1-minute warning. Go ahead.
Fabulous. Okay, thanks. I'm representing the union that I was president of at the EPA headquarters. I was a senior scientist in the Office of Pesticides and Toxic Substances for 27 years, and I was a leader of the union for 24 of those years. That union, NEFI Local 2050, was the first organization in the federal government to call attention to the public health hazards of fluoride. And we're here now to consider the merits of an analysis by another group of organized scientists in the government, those of the National Toxicology Program. Other commenters are commenting on the science. My focus is on scientific integrity and its relationship with political pressures. Regarding scientific integrity and political pressure, I'm unaware of any other NTP toxicology monograph to be put through 5 rounds of peer review, including one involving so-called interested agencies before final release. Anyway, Local 2050 became aware in the mid-'80s of fluoride's hazards through public comments and an employee complaint about EPA's proposed drinking water regulations. We conducted our own independent analysis and concluded that the EPA proposed health-based standard of 4 milligrams per liter was grossly wrong. And as a matter of fact, in 2006, the National Academy of Sciences Blue Ribbon Committee said the same thing that the union did 12 years before. We tried quietly through in-house talks with management to resolve this problem with the bad science, but the director of the Office of Drinking Water said, "Oh no, we went through the notice and comment process, and the case is closed." We eventually were contacted by NRDC to join their lawsuit by filing an amicus brief. And the lawsuit was over those grossly inadequate drinking water standards. And we also did other things like help citizens who found out that we had challenged EPA's abandonment of regulating asbestos back in 1984. Management was not happy about that. We were bargaining with management over scientific integrity for several years up until 1998, when the EPA installed carpeting, which was making employees sick, and that got out into the media and turned out to be a big brouhaha. So that was the end of bargaining over scientific integrity. We were able later, 10 years later, under the National Toxicology, under the National Partnership Council operation under Clinton administration, to get EPA to adopt what's called the Principles of Scientific Integrity. And we think that was the first such thing in any federal agency. It turned out, however, that the PSI was a toothless policy statement by EPA, which ignores it whenever it's convenient to do so. And in the matter of the fluoride toxicity, it still maintains that 4 milligrams per liter is an adequate public health protective standard. Incredible. EPA's successful defanging of the issue of scientific integrity by simply ignoring it has not been lost on the federal science establishment. The current model program of scientific integrity, recently published by the Office of Science and Technology Policy, codifies that toothlessness. In the NTP's 5-round peer review of the fluoride monograph, including interested agencies, is today's example of defanging the defanging science.
You have 1 minute left.
Integrity. Whatever happened to the two? Well, okay. My take on the review process is that if the political establishment disagrees with peer-reviewed scientific decision made by qualified scientists, just keep on reviewing until the politicians are satisfied. In his investigation of the explosion of the Challenger space shuttle, because Reagan pressured launch in sub-freezing temperatures, Richard Feynman said it best: "You can't fool Mother Nature." To continue to promote universal ingestion of fluoride would constitute public health and economic governmental malfeasance of the first order. Since 2015, I, along with other scientists, visited EPA offices twice to report on research showing
Your
fluoride
time is up, Mr. Hersey.
developmental neurotoxicity.
Thank you for your comments.
Nothing happened
I'm
until
going to
a
go ahead
lawsuit
and
was filed in NTP.
ask the Board of Scientific Counselors if there are any questions. And seeing none, I will thank you for your comments and move to the next commenter. Oh, sorry, thank you. Dr. Singla? Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you to the commenter for the comments. Not a question, I just wanted to offer a clarification to the comments that NRDC is not party to any lawsuits related to fluoride. We have submitted amicus briefs in relation to the case mentioned. However, the briefs were in support of neither party and were focused on the requirements of the law under the Toxic Substances Control Act.
Thank you for that clarification. Seeing no other comments, we'll move to the next commenter, Jack Call. And I see Mr. Call in the Zoom room.
Yes.
Yep, so you can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. You have 5 minutes, and then I'll give you a 1-minute warning.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, I am Dr. Jack Call, a practicing dentist for 46 years. I am the executive chair of the board of directors of the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, or IAOMT. We are a nonprofit organization founded in 1984. Our 1,500 members are dentists, physicians, and researchers who investigate and communicate safe, science-based treatments to promote whole body health. Our motto is, "Show me the science." Much of our academy's focus has been on the toxicology of materials used in dentistry. We are the largest organization devoted to this. We have especially focused on 3 commonly used toxic materials in dentistry. Number 1, mercury, a neurotoxin used in amalgam fillings. Number 2, bisphenol A, an endocrine disruptor used in sealants and composite fillings. And number 3, fluoride, used in rinses, toothpaste, varnishes, cements, and filling materials. They are all put directly into the mouth. Additionally, fluoride is used in modalities of direct ingestion in the form of fluoridated drinking water, fluoridated salt, and fluoride supplements. Next slide, please. For over 30 years, our organization has been sponsoring and funding research on fluoride's toxicity. We have been especially interested and very concerned about recently published studies regarding the neurotoxicity of fluoride, and therefore support the NTP's systematic review. We're very disappointed that fluoride-promoting dental interests, both within the federal government and outside it, have been trying to influence the NTP's findings, not based on science, but in an effort to defend their misguided policy of promoting water fluoridation. Next slide, please. What are the NTP's key findings? Number 1, that human epidemiological evidence supports a conclusion of moderate confidence that fluoride is a developmental neurotoxin. Number 2, that no safe, exposure threshold was found for fluoride's effect on IQ. And number three, that fluoride exposures experienced by pregnant women and children in the US today are within the range where human studies have found reduced IQ. The report provides extensive detail on the over 150 human studies identified as relevant. The report used rigorous, pre-established methods to rate the quality of individual studies. The IOMT agrees with the NTP conclusions. We believe the monograph should have been published on its intended public release date of May 18th, 2022. The revisions NTP made subsequent to it being blocked by fluoridation promoting divisions within HHS and the revisions suggested by the BSC working group will not alter the key findings. Any additional delays in declaring the report final are unjustified. The IOMT hopes the BSC will support the incredible effort that the NTP scientific experts have put into this systematic review. We agree with the external peer reviewers who offered the following comments. What you have done is state of the art, and the analysis itself is excellent, and you thoroughly address comments. And well done. And lastly, findings were interpreted objectively. Next slide, please. From both careful review of the evidence on the association between fluoride and tooth decay, those the countries without having fluoridated their water supply,
You have
as well
1
as
minute
those,
left.
okay, as well as those, again, countries either that have fluoridated their water supply or not, over the last 50 years, you can see the dramatic declines in both groups of countries. And this information is provided from the World Health Organization. Next slide, please. The precautionary principle reminds us that in the face of uncertain evidence, it is important to act in a manner that protects public health. Next slide, please. I close with the IOMT's position on fluoride. Quote, in summary, given the elevated number of fluoride sources and the increased rates of fluoride intake in the American population, which have risen substantially since water fluoridation began in the 1940s, it has become a necessity to reduce and work toward eliminating avoidable sources of fluoride exposure, including water fluoridation, fluoride-containing dental materials, and other fluoridated products.
Your time is up. Thank you very much for your comments, and I'm going to ask BSC members if you have any clarifying questions. Seeing none, we have Mr. Pollack, our final commenter. Howard Pollack. I see Mr. Pollack in the Zoom room. You want to come onto video and off mute so you can share your comments? Mr. Pollack? Oh, great. Okay. We see you, so you have 5 minutes to comment, and I'll give you a 1 minute.
Good afternoon. Good morning here in California. Dr. Gray and members of the board, I'm Howard Pollack, clinical professor in the Department of Preventive and Restorative Dental Sciences at the School of Dentistry, University of California, San Francisco. I'm a dentist, board certified in dental public health, and an advisor to the California Department of Public Health. Today, I'm speaking on behalf of the American Dental Association. Community water fluoridation is the controlled adjustment of the natural fluoride content in water to levels recommended by the U.S. Public Health Service to help prevent tooth decay. For more than 75 years, it has been a safe and inexpensive way to reduce tooth decay in children and adults by at least 25%. The CDC hailed it as one of 10 great public health achievements of the 20th century. The ADA was initially pleased that NTP was examining the literature, as were others, to determine whether there was an association between fluoride exposure and IQ. Unfortunately, we're now in the position of having to ask if you really want to stake NTP's reputation on a report whose research methods, conclusions, clarity, and transparency have been so unorthodox. First, the public deserves to know that its research agencies are not arbitrarily changing peer reviewers when the results are not to their liking. NTP started by asking the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, NASEM, to serve as the report's peer reviewer. NASEM is the acknowledged gold standard for reviewing complex scientific issues. After the NASEM committee reported the first two drafts would not survive scientific scrutiny without major revision, NTP abandoned that course of peer review and instead handpicked its own panel to review the draft before you. That is not consistent with the spirit of a truly independent peer review. NTP also has not resolved what NASEM identified as worrisome inconsistencies in its risk of bias determinations. NASEM questioned several instances where NTP appeared to favor studies supporting its hypothesis and dismiss others refuting it. In response, NTP removed its meta-analysis from the current draft. Meta-analysis findings are used to reveal the biases, strengths, and weaknesses of existing studies. Both of these actions are red flags for transparency and scientific integrity. Second, we question why NTP has been so averse to adding a disclaimer, as NASEM recommended, clarifying that its literature review did not validate the hypothesis that consistent exposure to low levels of fluoride impact IQ. A lay reader would have difficulty ascertaining that the report's findings are limited to fluoride exposures that are more than double what the US Public Health Service recommends for community water fluoridation. A disclaimer would help prevent the findings from being mischaracterized in debates about fluoridating local water systems. Finally, even if NTP published its report today, it would already be out of date. NTP's finding is based on 19 studies, and at least 9 more have been published since the study period ended in 2020, including 2 meta-analyses. One found, I quote, the limitations of most studies raise uncertainties about both the causal nature of such relation and the exact thresholds of exposure involved. Such key issues can only be confirmed by additional high-quality longitudinal studies. Another published last week found uncritical acceptance of fluoride IQ studies has hindered methodological progress. In other words, the current state of the science does not validate the hypothesis that fluoride exposure is consistently associated with lower IQ in children. We therefore strongly support the BSC working group's recommendations regarding NTP's meta-analysis manuscript. At a time when the public's trust in federal research is declining, we urge you to consider whether this report is consistent with the White House Task Force on Scientific Integrity's recommendations for federal agencies to improve their research processes and adopt better methods of communicating scientific findings to lay audiences. Since there's no compelling scientific or public health reason for rushing this report to publication, we urge NTP not to publish this report until our concerns identified both here and in our written comments are resolved. I thank you for giving us the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your comments. Board members, please raise your hand if you have clarifying questions. I do have a question for you, Mr. Pollack. Would you restate the disclaimer? You suggested there was a disclaimer you would like to see.
Well, the disclaimer that the findings do not support consistent evidence of effect of low fluoride concentrations in water below 1.5 milligrams per liter with IQ.
Great, thank you. That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure I heard you correctly. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so thank you for your comments. And Mr. Pollack is the last person who had signed up to provide oral comments, so our oral comment period has ended. We are scheduled to take a break, 10 minutes? 15 minutes. Okay, we're scheduled to take a 15-minute break, and then we will come back for deliberation of the Board of Scientific Counselors and conversation with members of the working group about the report.
I just ask for the BSC members to join 2 minutes earlier so we can do a roll call. Make sure everybody's in the room before we reconvene. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll see you after the break.